The Stuart period. James VI and James I. Elizabeth I never married and so had no children of her own to inherit her throne. When she died in 1603, her heir was her cousin James VI of Scotland. He became King James I of England, Wales and Ireland, but Scotland remained a separate country. Ireland. During this period, Ireland was an almost completely Catholic country. Henry VII and Henry VIII had extended English control outside the Pale and had established English authority over the whole country. Henry VIII took the title King of Ireland. English laws were introduced and local leaders were expected to follow the instructions of the Lord Lieutenants in Dublin. During the reigns of Elizabeth I and James I, many people in Ireland opposed rule by the Protestant government in England. There were a number of rebellions. The English government encouraged Scottish and English Protestants to settle in Ulster, the northern province of Ireland, taking over the land from Catholic landholders. These settlements were known as plantations. Many of the new settlers came from southwest Scotland, and other land was given to companies based in London. James later organised similar plantations in several other parts of Ireland. This had serious long-term consequences for the history of England, Scotland and Ireland. The rise of Parliament. Elizabeth I was very skilled at managing Parliament. During her reign, she was successful in balancing her wishes and views against those of the House of Lords and those of the House of Commons, which was increasingly Protestant in its views. James I and his son Charles I were less skilled politically. Both believed in the divine right of kings, the idea that the king was directly appointed by God to rule. They thought that the king should be able to act without having to seek approval from Parliament. When Charles I inherited the thrones of England, Wales, Ireland and Scotland, he tried to rule in line with this principle. When he could not get Parliament to agree with his religious and foreign policies, he tried to rule without Parliament at all. For 11 years, he found ways in which to raise money without Parliament's approval, but eventually trouble in Scotland meant that he had to recall Parliament. The beginning of the English Civil War. Charles I wanted the worship of the Church of England to include more ceremony and introduced a revised prayer book. He tried to impose this prayer book on the Presbyterian Church in Scotland, and this led to serious unrest. A Scottish army was formed, and Charles could not find the money he needed for his own army without the help of Parliament. In 1640, he recalled Parliament to ask it for funds. Many in Parliament were Puritans, a group of Protestants who advocated strict and simple religious doctrine and worship. They did not agree with the king's religious views and disliked his reforms of the Church of England. Parliament refused to give the king the money he asked for, even after the Scottish army invaded England. Another rebellion began in Ireland because the Roman Catholics in Ireland were afraid of the growing power of the Puritans. Parliament took this opportunity to demand control of the English army, a change that would have transferred substantial power from the king to Parliament. In response, Charles I entered the House of Commons and tried to arrest 5 parliamentary leaders, but they had been warned and were not there. No monarch has set foot in the Commons since. Civil war between the king and Parliament could not now be avoided and began in 1642. The country split into those who supported the king, the Cavaliers, and those who supported Parliament, the Roundheads. Oliver Cromwell and the English Republic. The king's army was defeated at the battles of Marston Moor and Naseby. By 1646, it was clear that Parliament had won the war. Charles was held prisoner by the Parliamentary army. He was still unwilling to reach any agreement with Parliament, and in 1649 he was executed. England declared itself a republic called the Commonwealth. It no longer had a monarch. For a time, it was not totally clear how the country would be governed. For now, the army was in control. One of its generals, Oliver Cromwell, was sent to Ireland where the revolt which had begun in 1641 still continued, and where there was still a royalist army. Cromwell was successful in establishing the authority of the English Parliament, but did this with such violence that even today Cromwell remains a controversial figure in Ireland. The Scots had not agreed to the execution of Charles I and declared his son Charles II to be king. He was crowned King of Scotland and led a Scottish army into England. Cromwell defeated this army in the battles of Dunbar and Worcester. Charles II escaped from Worcester, famously hiding in an oak tree on one occasion, and eventually fled to Europe. Parliament now controlled Scotland as well as England and Wales. After his campaign in Ireland and victory over Charles II at Worcester, Cromwell was recognised as the leader of the new republic. He was given the title of Lord Protector and ruled until his death in 1658. When Cromwell died, his son Richard became Lord Protector in his place, but was not able to control the army or the government. Although Britain had been a republic for 11 years, without Oliver Cromwell, there was no clear leader or system of government. Many people in the country wanted stability. People began to talk about the need for a king.